So good afternoon, everyone. I see that we have some participants popping in. I was just awaiting to get more participants to start. But just to give you a general introduction, before starting the session. So this is a workshop that was created here under the scope of the One Net project. I will give you a brief introduction of what is the One Net project in the end. But this is a session that fits not only from the Portuguese demonstration side, because the One Net project has several demonstrations in it, one of them being the Portuguese demonstration. So we have here participants from the Portuguese demonstration itself, but we also have participation of UNI, the Florida School of Regulation here, specifically addressing a topic related to the barriers to consumer engagement. And yeah, just introducing briefly. So I'm Madalena Lacerda from ERREDS. I'm also here joined by our colleagues from UI, the Florida School of Regulation, Nicolo and Danielle. And also by my colleagues in the Portuguese demonstration, Alexandre Lucas from Inesctec, Gonçalo Gloria from R&D Nesser, and then Rui Pestana from REN. So without further ado, I will share here my screen. Hope this works with all of you. Anyone give me a thumbs up if you see the presentation.
Yes, we do.
Okay, perfect.
Change it to presentation mode, maybe.
Yeah. It is now in presentation mode. Okay. So the topic of the workshop is exactly consumer engagement in flexibility markets. Our goal here is not only to give you a brief overview of what is in fact flexibility, what are flexibility markets, how can consumers participate in this, what different interactions exist or can exist within these flexibility markets, what is the stage of development, but also we want to give you some results of analysis that we have been doing within the Portuguese demonstration, and also taking a brief moment to speak about the barriers. What are the barriers to consumer engagement for flexibility markets? And of course, this is something that will envisage the interaction, we foresee the interaction with all of the participants here, because we want this to be more interactive possible. So again, thank you all for being here. I will start now. Just providing you, I hope you can see the agenda for the meeting. So we will start with a brief introduction to all of this. So talking about the flexibility, what is flexibility? Again, speaking of the benefits that exist, not only to the system operators. We are here. Two system operators in the table, so REN and ERREDS, but we also want to look at the consumer side. And afterwards, we'll have 15 minutes dedicated to the perspective of the system operator. Then the barriers to customer engagement. This is going to be led by Florida School of Regulation. Then we're going to show to you our analysis on the customer perspective, and then just do a quick wrap up. Just to mention that we'll have interactive moments with you, and these interactive moments will come in two separate ways. So we'll have Q&A parts within in our presentation, in our session. And for this Q&A, so if you have any question that you want to raise, during the presentation, you can just click in the Q&A and add your question. We will address that within the Q&A part. But we also are going to have some polls to understand your view, to collect some positions, some ideas. And the way that's going to work, it's basically we're going to receive a pop-up with the question. You just need to select the best fit answer from your perspective. So generally speaking, this is the agenda for today. And again, thank you all for participating here. As I said, this workshop fits within the OneNet project. To give you here an overview of what is the OneNet project. So the aim of it is to create this fully replicable and scalable architecture, so that the whole European electricity system operates as a single one, where we make sure that this variety of markets allow this universal participation of stakeholders from various levels, from various sizes, from small consumers to large producers. So all of them included. And OneNet does that with a strong knowledge base. So it really goes into past projects and collects and collects knowledge from them. It has strong and large demonstrators to test the solutions. This is split within 15 European countries. And then it is a really big consortium. So we have 72 partners on board of the project. And then the project also envisages this constant dialogue with relevant stakeholders, and this is done through the Griffon platform. So this is the OneNet project in the slides. And from the OneNet project, we dive into the topic of flexibility, because this is the core. This is the core topic that we want to address here today, but also the core topic that the OneNet project picks on. And before speaking about what is flexibility, I want to hear from you if you know what is flexibility. So I want to use this moment to launch the first poll of the session, just to capture your idea, your view, if you indeed know what is flexibility. So I ask for the poll to be launched. Thank you. So we'll have just a brief moment for participants to select your option. I cannot see the voting. I don't know if anyone can help me just understanding if we are having votes. How many do we have? Okay, it seems people are voting. Okay, just give a bit more time, and then we close the poll. Okay, I think we can close the poll. Thank you. So just to give you an overview, I don't know if people can see the results, but we have 72% of the voters saying that they are completely aware of what is flexibility and why it is needed. So this is good. This is really good. We have 14% of people saying that they've heard of it but don't quite know what it is. I hope that today's session will help a little bit more on that side. Then we have 10% people saying that they know what it is but don't know why it is important. and then one person saying that they don't know what it is at all. So I hope that this is more cleared out, but still 72% of people being completely aware of it. Perfect. Then I will go to my next slides, specifically addressing what is flexibility and why it is needed. So as I think and hope you may know, the electricity system is going through not a revolution, but is going through deep changes. So we are moving from a centralized system where the flows are unidirectional. So there's dispatchable generation that is flowed to the transmission network, that then sends the electricity to the distribution and then to the end customers. So this landscape is changing a lot, and we are moving from the centralized, simple approach of the electricity system to a more complex one, but also to one where we have more participation from several sides. So we are having, instead of this dispatchable generation, we are having more variable generation into the system. So being included into the system. We also have distributed energy resources, which are the PVs, the rooftop PVs, which are the electric vehicles. So all of them connected to the system, and instead of us having this simple unidirectional approach to the system, we will face this bidirectionality, let's say, of the system. So actually the end consumers producing electricity to the network. And this changing landscape also envisages a change in how the electricity system is managed. So we move into the typical approach that was to adapt the supply to fit the demand, to this adjustment of both supply and demand. So we can have this balance between supply and demand in the end. And this is flexibility. So this capability that the system has to adjust this supply and demand at all times. But flexibility can come from the producer side, and can come also from the consumer side. The topic that we are going to address here today is the flexibility from the consumer side, or demand side flexibility, or demand side response. There are several ways you can speak about it, and there are specifically two types of demand side flexibility. You can have the implicit demand side flexibility, that is basically the reaction that the consumer has to some price signals. This is also called this price-based demand side flexibility. So it really comes back to a choice from the consumer part, taking into account this possibility to reduce the electricity tariff in the end. So it's more of a reaction to something. And then we have the explicit demand side flexibility. The explicit demand side flexibility is committed. It's dispatchable and can be traded in markets. Okay, and we call this this incentive driven demand side flexibility. So we have these two: response to signal, and then a committed, dispatchable, and tradable type of flexibility. Then, to make sure that all of this is possible, we have, of course, different interactions and different players that are here involved. And this is, of course, the system operators, which in fact have the needs for this provision of flexibility services. Then we have the aggregators. These aggregators are a figure that are able to bring together multiple resources provide these flexibility services to the network. And this aggregation, or these levels of aggregation, of course, depends on the type of service that is being provided to the network, and also the network towards the services being provided. For example, different levels of aggregation are foreseen if a service is going to be provided for the TSO, which who manages the extreme high voltage networks, and from the DSO side, so looking into the medium voltage, the high voltage, and low voltage network. So different types of aggregation here are needed. Then we have, of course, the consumers who are the end users that can actually provide these flexibility services. Then the market operators who manage and operate the market platforms, and then, of course, in the bottom of all this, we have the regulation and the regulators who, of course, foresee and regulate the operation of the markets and define the rules. So these are the actors, and now I just have one curiosity. That's more for the Portuguese reality point of view, since we are focusing here a bit on the Portuguese demonstration. Just to let you know that the Portuguese regulatory framework for the electricity system has changed recently with the publication of this Decree Law 15/2022, and this decree law actually included in it the possibility for the system services to be provided by all agents. This includes the producers, self-consumption, storage, and also from demand side response, so from the consumer side. Also, this it creates possibility for the DSO to procure non-frequency system services. This means congestion management services, and then focusing here on the parts of the implicit demand side flexibility, we have this provision that now retailers are obliged to present electricity supply contracts with dynamic pricing if they have more than 200,000 consumers connected. But of course, all of this creates this legal framework. But then, what we need to do and what's going to happen this year to make sure all of this is possible is that the related regulations will be all revised to fit within the objectives of this decree law. So regarding here the introduction, that's what I wanted to say to you. I just one more thing I forgot, sorry. It is the benefits. So it's important for you to understand what are the benefits from one side and the other. We have system operators from one side who really benefit from this flexibility, especially because resorting to flexibility can improve the electricity system reliability, but also it can be a way to increase RES penetration without actually reinforcing in capacity the network. This is also connected to the point on the investment deferral. This means that this flexibility can also serve as a capacity or extra capacity to the system. So the investments in actual capacity of the network can be deferred in time, okay? And of course, being able to target the congestions of the network will be able to increase the efficiency of the network itself. So this is just a brief overview of what are the benefits from the system operation side. But then looking at the side of the consumers, there are also a lot of benefits that can be pinpointed. Regarding the implicit ones, you of course have the option of reducing the electricity tariffs, so you can actually consume in times where the tariff is lower, okay? And you can also have greater control and choice. So this option of changing the behavior to the benefit of also yourself and your tariff in the end is something that flexibility also brings up. And then in the end, of course, the improved reliability, it's not something that's a benefit from the system operator point of view, but also to the customer side. Okay, the reliability that in the end you will have the electricity and without failures and with quality. And this also gives you the option of increasing your independence, your energy independence, because also taking into account that rooftop PV is an option, and you can shift your demand in times where your PV is producing. Okay, so these changes in behavior is something that is important and that can arise a lot of benefits. And I want to launch the second poll now, which is the benefits for system operator and consumers. To have your view now, looking at all of these benefits, what is to you the most important benefit of these? These are of course more connected to the customer point of view. So yes, please answer to the poll so we can have your opinion here. Just give a little bit of time for people to answer. Okay, so we don't have a complete winner as we did in the last one. We have kind of a split one, especially between the lower tariffs and increased renewables integration. So it is good to see this increased interest and importance being given to the increased renewables integration. This is something that we all want as system operators, and also a push by the European Commission to have more renewables in the system. But of course, lower tariffs plays an important role in here. Also greater control and choice has 14% of answers. Yeah, good to know your view on this. Then I will change here to the next point of the agenda, which is the system operator's perspective. So as you know, we want to address the consumers, but first we want to give you our perspective of flexibility and why it is needed. So we will start with the DSO point of view, tackling the main challenges and giving you here the scope from the DSO side. So flexibility is a tool to respond to upcoming challenges that we are going to have in the network. And these upcoming challenges are really related, of course, to this increased ambition to have more renewables connected to the system and having the consumers as active participants in the system. So in the end, we'll have more variability to manage, so more variability on the production side, but also more variability on the demand side, especially with the distributed assets that will have the electric vehicles, the solar PV installed. So we need to manage these variabilities, and we need to accurately quantify them, or try to understand how is the system going to behave. So this is something that is now more than ever important. So to have these accurate forecasts, not only from the demand side, but also from the generation side, so you can actually know what's going to happen to the system. With these a lot of assets being connected, all of this variability, we tend to have greater needs to actually observe what is happening in the network at lower voltages. So at the voltages at the levels of the residential consumers. So to actually know what's happening to the network. And we'll have, of course, taking into account all of these dimensions, the consumers being active, the electricity vehicles. So a lot of new assets being connected. There's a lot of more data also being generated and processed. Okay, so this is an increased challenge that we as DSOs and also TSOs have, but especially from the distribution side, this is something that we need to address. And all of these variability, all of these production also from the demand side, from the lower voltage side, this also increases the probability of network congestions. So this can happen also in lower voltage of the network. Just giving you a brief scope of what is being targeted by the DSO. So we are, of course, referring to ranges from the kilowatts, the kilowatt side. Okay, things that are more reduced in scope and dimension. This is not happening from the DSO side, but we'll get there next. We want to solve more local issues on our distribution network, and also, of course, as I mentioned before, focusing here on the congestion management side. So I will then leave the floor here for Rui to speak about the TSO perspective.
Okay, thank you. Rui Pestana from REN, the Portuguese TSO. So regarding the TSO perspective, I mean, we have the same alignment as the TSO. So we have increase of renewable penetration. Of course, to mitigate that the variability of the solar and wind, we have been using for several times better forecast tools, initially for wind and now for solar, because it's increasing rapidly in Portugal. Of course, we want to make the consumer as an active participant, because until now, the system service that the TSO is procuring was coming more from the production side, from the generation. And now we have the user engagement, and we want to capture their participation. Okay. One thing that we should remind is that sometimes the problem is not finding generation to meet the load. Sometimes is with the new initiatives of creating big power plants, not on the consumer level, but at the grid level. We are facing a new problem is the lack of load. Okay. So this means that sometimes we may ask the consumer to increase their generation. Of course, when they do so, they can get energy at a lower prices, or they can get the same energy with a discount because they are receiving a premium for the system service to increase the load at that time. Okay. Because sometimes we cannot guarantee that if you have too much sun or too much wind in Portugal, we can export that energy to Spain and to France and to the rest of Europe. And one thing that Madalena has already mentioned, for the TSO, aggregation is relevant, because normally we work at the megawatt range. Okay, so we need size matters for us. So we are working at the minimum scale of 1 megawatt. And of course, this is completely feasible if they are consumers with a lower capacities of service, by aggregating with aggregators. That's their function. They give size. Okay, so of course we are foreseeing some local congestions that may happen during maintenance work, but normally it's not the case. But the TSO perspective is, of course, is the system balance, is the global balancing of the entire system, of the entire area, in this country, in this case, Portugal. Next slide, Madalena, please. Okay, and this is just a minor details. As you know, when you have a new market or a new change of the market, has to be well discussed. It has to be approved by the regulator. So there is just a minor points that we are still improving, clarifying in our country. Is that if the consumer is buying energy from one trader, does he has to oblige to use the same trader for the system service? Sometimes they are not the best companies to do so, and they normally operate in different directions. And so this is an odd topic when we addressing flexibility by adding system service to the retail market. So because when there are these small mismatches, because you need to forecast the load, and then you need to account for the service providers. I mean, who is the balancing party to account for the mismatch? Okay. The other thing that we see is that when you have a congestion, and then we need to reduce a load or to increase a load to solve congestion, we may cause an imbalance in the market, and then we need to account, I mean, the responsibility and how we're going to handle this. So typically, it's just to highlight that the settlement rules need to be improved, and this is always a work in progress. And we are, of course, discussing this with the consumers, with the DSOs, with the regulators, and the other Portuguese authorities. Thank you.
Thank you,
Back
Rui.
to you, Madalena.
Yeah, thank you, Rui. I will now pass the floor to Gonçalo to give us here the perspective from the OneNet project. So to give you here a bit of highlight to what we have done within the Portuguese demonstration. Please, Gonçalo, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. So yeah, I'm Gonçalo from Nestor, and I will give you here a brief overview of what we are doing in the OneNet project inside the Portuguese demonstration. So we basically created three different business use cases. Two of them related with the exchange of information regarding congestion management, one for short-term products and another for long-term products. That is the business use case 1 and 2. And the third one is related with the exchange of information for operational planning point of view. We have also a regional business use case that it's a demo that will be done among the Portuguese, Spanish, and French partners that are part of the Western cluster of the OneNet that is related with the cross-border grid prequalification. But let's focus on the other 5 that we are developing in the PT demo. So for the congestion management subjects, we created 2 system use cases that are the first one is related with the product and grid prequalification requirements, and the second one with day-ahead flexibility needs. Related with the 3 other system use cases that are for the operational planning scope. The 6th one is related with maintenance plans, the 7 with the consumption and generation forecast information exchange, and the 8th with the forecast of short circuit levels. To exchange this information, and the goal here is, since we are at this stage tackling the SO perspective, so we want to create more information exchange between both system operators in order to have more visibility with all the problematics that Madeleine and Rui raised. This is crucial for the system operators' point of view, and in that regards, we had to create 2 different data exchange platforms, one for redes and another for the TSO REM. And these data exchange platforms are cloud-based and are based in RESTful APIs. So this is the information is exchanged to some RESTful APIs. And for each of the system use cases, there are secured and dedicated APIs for exchanging this information. Regarding to the demo phase, so we are aiming into two specific areas, the area of Batalha in the center of Portugal and Trás-os-Montes in the north east of Portugal. However, the goal is to then to try to address this for all the country. Madalena, can you skip please to the next slide? Yeah, so from in the scope of this workshop, let's focus on the first two system use cases that are related with the flexibility coordination. And I bring you here this figure that is from the ASM report, that is the Active System Management report that was done with the cooperation of TSOs and DSOs. And here you can see the overall congestion management process into 5 different phases. So you have the preparation where the product is defined and the pre-qualification is done. Then you jump to the forecast phase where the congestions need to be identified. And the remaining phase are the market phase, the monitoring and activation, and then by hand you have the settlement. In the OneAct project, we are addressing the 2 first phases. So the system use case 1 goes into the preparation phase, and the system use case 2 goes into the forecast phase. So now I will dive for inside each of the system use cases to explain you a bit more what we did there. Can you go forward, Madeleine? Yeah. So in the first use case that we addressed, the pre-qualification phase, we need to split here into 2 types of pre-qualification. We have the product pre-qualification that basically it's to check if the unit that is willing to participate in a certain flexibility market performs according to the required requirements that the system operator settles, and the grid pre-qualification that is done from the side of evaluating if there is if the deliverable energy can be in fact transported through the network without causing any problems in the system operator's network. Regarding to that, we have here this schema that tries to show you what is the flow of the information. So we have the three main roles here. So from one side, the consumers that Alexandre will address in more detail, the consumer perspective after my speech. And we have two different system operators. Can be 2 DSOs, 2 TSOs, a DSO and a TSO. So I call them system operator 1 and system operator 2. So all the process starts with a consumer having interest in participating in a certain flexibility market, and the system operator that retrieves this information and checks if it's according to the requirements that he sets. This is what we call the product pre-qualification, and this result is then sent to any neighbor system operator and to the consumer, the result of this first pre-qualification. Then it comes the grid pre-qualification time that can be done by the system operator. That should be done by the system operator where the consumer is connected to. So that's why we can have system operator 1 or system operator 2 performing the grid pre-qualification, because this needs to be done by the system operator where the consumer is connected to. And then this information is again shared with the aggregated and the system operator. And regarding this, I have here a sample of the data that should be exchanged. This we define this in a standardized way. So it's through a JSON file, but here it's in a tabular way. Some of the fields that should be exchanged in the result, when you see in the flow of the information, the result arrow, this is the kind of information that should be exchanged. So what is the type of resource? What is the mode of activation? What is the flexibility direction, if it's to increase or to decrease the consumption? Where is this FSP connected? If the FSP is aggregated or if it's a single one? What is the maximum full activation time? And in the end, you have if the product prequalification and grid prequalification was accepted or rejected, because this is something that needs to be assessed by the system operators. Yeah, Madalena. Thank you. And going to the second use case, that is the one that addresses the day-ahead flexibility needs. We have here two main steps, one from the system operator side and another one from the consumer side. From the system operator side, we have the flexibility needs identification, that basically it's to foreseen if any congestion is expected into their influence area and how much is needed to overcome that congestion in the network. On the other hand, from the consumer point of view, and this is what Alexandre will present later, it's the consumer should be able to identify how much flexibility he is able to offer in a certain time frame. So that is what we call the flexibility potential assessment. Madalena can, yeah. So about the flow of information here, it's easy. So from one side, we have the SO that computes the flexibility needs. From the consumer side, we have the identification of the flexibility potential, and this information can and should be shared among all the players that are in the demonstration. What are the information that is exchanged? Once again, we created some standardized model to exchange this information. That is, this information comes from whom, if it's a DSO, TSO, or aggregator. The node ID where we are addressing the needs or the flexibility potential, with the active power quantity and reactive power quantity, and the period that it refers to. And the last field is related if it's a need or if it's an offer. And so it's basically all these mechanisms of exchanging information that we are creating now in the Portuguese demo. And I present you a bit of the scope from the system operator point of view. Alexandre will next speak about the consumer point of view. Thanks.
Thank you, Gonçalo. It was indeed a clear presentation. I will not take too much time. We now have Florence School of Regulation to speak about the barriers. So without further ado, I call from the UI side to have their presentation being shared. I will stop here the sharing from my side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madalena. You should be able to see my screen, right?
Yes, I see.
Okay.
I see
Perfect.
Daniel.
Thank you, Madalena. Indeed, this section is dedicated to barriers to customer engagement. Indeed, in the previous section, we have seen the key elements that characterize flexibility in electricity markets. And one of the key elements is indeed the customer or the consumer, as you prefer to call them. But what is missing so far is to find the proper way to engage customers in this process of changing our paradigms in consuming and producing energy. Indeed, in our work aims to answer to three main questions. What do we know about customer engagement? Why is it still so challenging to engage customers? And how can we do to overcome of these barriers and basically close the gap between the current situation and future flexibility markets? Actually, in this presentation, we will focus more on the first two questions, but maybe we can dedicate some time on the third question in the Q&A section. Before diving into the topic of customer engagement, I would like to remember you where we started in order to understand where we are now. And indeed, here I just present you a very fast overview on how the EU regulation also try to adapt and empower the customer within electricity sector. Indeed, a first reference to demand response, it is present in the Energy Efficiency Directive in 2012. Then the concept of demand response has been further stressed and developed within the clean energy package. And lastly, it is worth to mention that in particular in the last year, several efforts have been done in order to promote flexibility and empower customers. And here I just presented the framework guideline on demand response published by Acer, but also on the proposal of the European Commission to reform electricity markets. The customers cover a very important role. Well, moving to customer engagement. Customer engagement is a multidimensional subject. And a first element that adds complexity to this topic is indeed the complexity of customers. Indeed, we can identify several customers, but why it's so important to classify and know properly customers? Well, basically because if we want to propose the right strategy to engage them, we need to understand what are their needs, priorities, etc. Actually, several kind of classification of customers exist. Here we propose a classification that is based on socioeconomic characteristics that allow to distinguish between residential, industrial, commercial, etc. customers. But it is worth to mention that also within this classification, it is relevant to note that different customers present different mindsets and different behavioral characteristics that are characterized by rational and irrational elements. And last point that is worth to mention is that actually customer engagement is an ongoing process that, for example, cannot finish with the drafting of a contract. Indeed, that's because customer characteristics, preferences, etc., change across the time. So it's important to keep in mind that we need to meet all the along the life of the customer is needs or their needs. A second element that adds complexity into the topic is the context where the customers have to make a choice. Indeed, the first point is that human rationality is not perfect. On the contrary, is bounded. And this gives space to social and psychological elements within the decision-making process. Moreover, when customers have to decide if participating or not in a flexibility markets, they have to evaluate if a market exists and what are the economic rationales in participating into the market, what is the legal framework. So basically, if, for example, regulation allow customers to provide flexibility services, and finally, what are the technologies and alternatives that are available in order to connect and integrate customers within the power grid. According to this overview, we basically identified 4 main groups of barriers to customer engagement. And basically, you can see them here in this table. So we identified behavioral, economic, regulatory, and technical barriers. In the following of this presentation, I will dedicate a slide for each of these barriers. But before moving to behavioral barriers, I would like to submit you a poll in order to catch your perspective on the topic. So the question is, if you are a Portuguese customer who has never participated in demand response program, what are the main reasons that explain your behavior in this regard? Here you have 4 alternative answers, and please pick up your motivation. Thank you. I suppose we can wait. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, this is a very interesting result. And indeed, let's move to our analysis. Well, basically, our question already anticipated a bit our findings. And indeed, in the context of behavioral barriers, we identified three main typologies of barriers. So lack of awareness, lack of skills to elaborate information, and the status quo bias. Very firstly, one of the main characteristic of energy customers is that they are not so aware about their consumption and how their behavior impacts on their energy bills. On the contrary, they are, broadly speaking, customers have a lot of misperception that can also have a negative impact when they have to estimate benefits and costs in participating to demand response program, for example. But to be aware about these opportunities is not a sufficient condition in order to provide flexibility services. Indeed, because customers need to own all the skills that are required to find the most appropriate solution, make a comparison, etc. And sometimes could also happen that customers are completely unaware about what are the technological solution, and they also could be completely excluded from, for example, digital technologies and so on. But even in case customers can make comparison and evaluate alternatives, well, say that changing is per se an effort, and broadly speaking, customers do not like to change from the status quo to a new situation that they don't know properly. And the main reason behind this behavior is indeed loss aversion that basically leads customer in a state of inertia. And it has been observed how this inertia and this kind of biases can be exacerbated by the lack of trust on energy market operators. At this point, before moving to economic barriers, we have a second poll, indeed, on economic barriers. And this question is also for Portuguese customers in particular. And in this case, we would like to know which of the following alternatives represent the main constraint for you in economic terms for providing flexibility services.
So just to comment to your words, Daniele, here we would like really to know, aside from the behavioral dimension that we already observed earlier, really from an economic perspective, quite well distributed.
Yeah, indeed. This is also interesting for our analysis in the context of OneNet. Indeed, also in this case, our question reflects our finding in the analysis of the economic barriers. Indeed, in this context, we identified three main barriers. So the not existence of a clear business case, risk aversion in general, and conflicting signals. Let's say that when customers have to evaluate the revenues that derive from the provision of flexibility services, these potential revenues are not so interesting for them. And consider also that revenues can be reduced by several costs that are necessary to participate into flexibility markets, such as entry cost, investment cost, administrative cost, etc. Moreover, these kind of services are also related to a high risk aversion that basically derive from the lack of information about the alternatives and possibilities that exist, and moreover from the fact that it's quite challenging to forecast future market and grid condition. Lastly, when participating to flexibility service markets, customers have also to evaluate if it's the most convenient option, because, for example, they can already have optimized their consumption and production profiles according to signals that come from wholesale markets. Moreover, providing flexibility is not the core business of most of customers. And finally, it could happen that participating in flexibility markets can have negative impacts in other energy components such as taxes, energy tariff, etc. So, in terms of the regulatory barriers, well, the first problem that we have seen is that, according to the current regulatory framework, customers are basically excluded from the participation in this kind of programs. In particular, let's refer to demand response, because flexibility markets in general is quite a new kind of market that are not so developed. And they are excluded also because nowadays we don't have the infrastructure that is required in order to provide this kind of services. And we can refer, for example, to the availability of smart meters or digital technologies that are required to manage the energy flows. Moreover, another issue is related to data privacy and access to information. Obviously, when we have to manage customers, we need to have clear information and data about their behavior, but on the contrary, this kind of information should be consistent with the protection of their privacy. Moreover, at the EU level, we have a very patchy situation in terms of regulation of data privacy and access to data, and market players can face difficulties in addressing different regulatory frameworks. Lastly, the current regulation apparently is not promoting so well the development of interoperable and standardized solution. And indeed, what is missing, and this is something that we will see also in the section on technical barriers, is a sufficient number of non-proprietary industrial standards. And in terms of interoperability, there isn't a regulatory framework that is that allow to prevent lock-in effects. So, coming to the last of our group of barriers, we the main problem is indeed, as mentioned before, the lack of a proper infrastructure And indeed, this kind of system are quite complex and challenging for a flexibility service provider. As we saw also on the side of regulatory barriers, we have many issues in terms of data and communication. Indeed, what are missing are consent mechanisms for third party that need to access customers' data, and we don't have sufficient open standards. Lastly, it's worth to mention that we can have problem also at the interface between customers and market player. Indeed, nowadays, we have different and solutions are available, and often they are not harmonized, and this can compromise the ability of customers to make a choice. In terms of energy management system, some of them could also not so user-friendly, and they are quite expensive. And lastly, technical issues can be faced also at the level of connection between retailers and customer that can need to interact, not also through technical devices, but also using apps, emails, etc. So this is that's all for what concern our analysis on barriers. But I would like to submit you a final poll, and actually this is for everyone who is attending this event. And I would like that you select among these groups of barriers the 2 barriers that, in your opinion, are the most relevant when we speak about customer engagement.
I think we can close because we are a bit behind schedule.
Yeah, sure. Indeed, that's it from our side, Madalena. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. We had, sorry, we had a Q&A moment, but we had been receiving some questions through the chat. So I ask the participants, it's best, I think, that way. If you have a question, please send it directly in the chat, okay, in the Q&A chat. So we can address them. We have been addressing the questions that you have been posing. So we'll do it this way, and then we can have we can address some further open questions later on. So I'll just leave now the floor to Alexandre to speak about the customer perspective on the Portuguese demonstration side. Thank you.
Thanks, Madalena. You see it in presentation mode? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this part of the workshop is intended to provide a more practical, hands-on perspective. We acknowledged right from the start that in the use cases that we developed, we were lacking some this practical perspective, and we should somehow include consumer engagement. We should bring to our analysis real data, real life data, and in the end, we thought that it would be too abstract to conduct these specifications of data exchange without, in fact, matching it with something that could be meaningful to to any consumer. And so, in fact, this is what I intend to cover here. I will go through these three topics, but the main focus of the presentation is for sure the methodology that we've used to estimate the flexibility of a particular commercial consumer that we've focused on, but it's very well scalable and replicable. Of course, we acknowledge that this consumer classification addressed by Daniele of residential, commercial, public buildings, and industrial, they exist, and it requires some different data analytics and different steps. This one that we will provide covers more. Covers all of the steps required, so it would be just a case of adjusting depending on the classification of the consumers. But I think it's self-explanatory, and I will go through it in a second. Yeah, so talking about flexibility, this entails concerns. There are some challenges, there are some opportunities, and many of which related to data. But some opportunities related come with these 4 bullets that I've gathered here. So if we look at the first 2, they explore the potential of consumer-generated data. There's so much that one can do with our own data, and even more when we consider third-party data. So in the near future, if in fact data markets become a reality, and they are already a reality, become more mature, this sense of collective value will be enhanced. And for those new to the concepts of flexibility and digitalization and what we can do with data, they should be aware of this. Something that will be a reality in the near future will be the connected data spaces. So as some of you may know, the Commission has this goal of having 9 data spaces dedicated to several topics. One of them is the energy data space, which should be running or should be a reality up to December 24, where concerns with ownership, privacy, sovereignty, and security should be tackled. And by using third-party data, we have these concepts as federated learning addressed in other projects, but for horizontal learning or vertical learning. So this is the true sense of the collective value. Also, the opportunities for data analytics are immense. So the weather forecast impacts on the operations. Some industries find value also in the estimation of the occupancy rate. Of course, the forecast for generation and consumption, and correlate some behaviors with asset utilization, and even for predictive maintenance, just to provide some examples. Then on the concern side, of course, when addressing flexibility, I've seen these 2 concerns. Will I disrupt my consumers? In terms of my clients, consumers in the sense of clients, and or my workers' comfort, for example. There's also this concern related to the optimization of the assets, such as I provide here a few examples: lighting, temperature, noise, etc. So okay, I can curtail my loads, but will this have an impact? And this is the same is true for the last point. Will it have an impact on my operations? So I could be willing to provide flexibility, but these topics are very much alive and should be well comprehended. Now, involving the consumers, we started brainstorming among our group, and we said, okay, how are we going to do this? So we thought of launching a survey, which we did, to collect consumers' permission to use their data. Large consumers, we had to focus on some activities such as hotels and supermarkets. We gathered quite a lot of authorizations to process their data. after a quality check of the data sets, and we ended up by focusing on one to provide an example. So we focused on a large supermarket chain, and some of the criteria were it was geographically dispersed, and a large portion of stores, of consumption locations. And so we ended up using 236 files that corresponded to time series for the whole year of 2019, with a time step of 15 minutes. And we only used, from the smart meters, we used the active power column, which was the more relevant for the congestion management analysis. Now, this exercise of estimating flexibility or carrying out this methodology was had to come with a lot of assumptions, of course. As you can imagine, Daniele mentioned some of these infrastructural restrictions, but nevertheless, we decided to go ahead with them. So the first one was we could not have access to the location. And so instead of working with forecasts, we had to base our whole analysis on historical data. So as you can imagine, not knowing the location, we could not match these locations or certain load profiles with other attributes such as the weather forecast. So as you know, temperature is quite a driver for some part of the energy consumption. Then the congestion management was the focus here in this exercise. So we just focused on reducing or curtailing the load, as you will see. We had to assume that for the purpose of this exercise that the loads would have dedicated monitoring devices. I mean, this is to say that we would be able to perform some baselining for future settlement if it was the case. And that the consumers and workers and the operations were not disrupted by the variations that we assumed here. We took some measurements from other European projects of some assets from the stores, and we took them as reference here for this exercise, mostly related to the refrigeration assets. And we assume here that they have the eco, normal, and boost modes of operation. And it's assumed also that the flexible loads would have the activation hardware and the activation or the variation modes or hardware associated to this. We acknowledge that electric vehicles are a reality in most of these stores, but they would require monitoring because they are not such recurring loads or could not match the recurring profiles of the smart meters readings that we had. And so unless we had the location and it was subject to some kind of forecast, we could not include them here. But they are in fact very pertinent loads for sure. So I will take you through a journey like a magazine, the 12 steps for flexibility estimation, which I hopefully will be able to do in 8 slides. So the first thing that we did was we took these 236 files and we thought that, okay, let's make a clustering just by the hypothesis, formulating the hypothesis that some stores would be more similar to some and others to some others. And in fact, we saw, we went ahead with 3 clusters. So for those who are not so familiar with dendrograms, we made this clustering based on Mahalanobis distance, which compares a point to the distance from a point to a statistical distribution. And the height here from the dendrogram should give already an idea that there are 2 clear groups And within the second group, in the right, there are two groups per se. So with the height, we went all the way to 40, and since we could formulate some hypotheses, or there was some explainability associated to these three clusters, we stopped here. Also for practical reasons, we went with three clusters. So we acknowledged that the higher or the larger cluster was related to smaller stores. The third cluster to medium. No, the second cluster to medium stores, and the third cluster to large supermarkets. And then we went to the second step of the methodology, which is the following. Okay, now we have these three clusters, and now we need to get some representative profiles. But I mean, we cannot just simply compute the median or the mean value, because I mean, there is high probability that we will make some error in interpreting these values. So what we did was, for each of the 15-minute interval in each cluster, we just took the statistical distribution of, let's say, the 120 stores, the 22 stores, and the 94 stores. So from each cluster. Okay, so for each 15 minutes, we took all the values and we compiled the statistical distribution. So what we got in the end was, in fact, the bottom diagrams, load diagrams, which are median values, but each of these values have a statistical distribution associated. So 96 of them in a day. This is an example for the 12th of March. And we also did, in the third step, was the identification of the operational profiles. And what is this? We saw that some of the profiles, they all had a base of backup services, emergency service. These cannot be switched off. And so, since we cannot work with them, they're not flexible, we just took it out. And how did we do this? We identified, in this case, that the 25th of December and the 1st of January, we had blank load profiles only with this very base load. And so we just subtracted, we deducted this consumption to the median profiles, and we got the operational profiles. Then the next step, the fourth step of this methodology, was to list, and this is true for any customer classification, from the residential to industrial one. But this has to be done. We need to list the main typical loads. We have a huge list. I just provide here a couple of examples. And the fifth step is to we came up with two types of categories. So for each of the loads, we said, okay, these are either variable and shiftable, not variable but shiftable, or the third one, nor variable nor shiftable. And so this last one we had to disregard. And we also came up with classification to group these types of assets into illumination, refrigeration, climatization, or you even see the O here, which is other loads. So, but we took these two first classification of variable and shiftable, and not variable but shiftable, and we worked with those. And in the sixth step, we had this approach of an event-driven consumption stratification. So we took the percentile 15 of the curve, and since these are recurring profiles, we identified the recurring profiles in each of the clusters, and we were able to some extent relate some of the dynamics of the stores with some of the assets dynamics. And this is true, for example, the clusters, so it is important to understand that the clusters, they have different times of closing. So the smaller stores close earlier, then the medium stores close a bit, I think it's something 10:30, and the largest stores, hypermarkets, they closed at 11, if I'm not mistaken. And so we could see in all of these profiles, when are the lighting, some of the lighting to be connected, turned on or off, some of the ventilation, some of the refrigeration, and so on. With all of these assets identified and the powers extracted from this event-driven analysis, we were able here to assign percentages that would not impact or would not disrupt both operations or consumer comfort and worker. And so, as an example, see, if we measured that in a certain time, the lighting would represent 14% of the power at that time, and if we assign the 10% potential variation of the lighting system, this would represent 1.4 between 6:30 and 9:45, which is basically the operation time window. And we did the same for cluster 2 and cluster 3, and we did the same for the rest of the assets. Just another example, the refrigeration cabinets. We analyzed many of the loads of the refrigeration. We have cooling, and we have positive refrigeration and negative refrigeration. And in this case, the defrosting of the cabinets that happen quite often during the day from 5:45 in this example to 6:30, well, they are defrosting, so we cannot make use of any flexibility. So we put 0. So it's as simple as this. Now we went for the 8th step of the methodology, which was to multiply basically the percentages that we have here in the first columns of the clusters with the actual power of the statistical distribution of each of the 15 minutes, okay? And we get already a time series for each of the 15 minutes. But now it's not only enough, because this is just for one representative store. And we need to know now what is the flexibility perimeter, or what is the area of influence of the substation. For this purpose, we took the substation of Batalha in use case 2, and by using Google Maps we were able to find out that we had one large store in this area. So this area was based on a metric from the JRC Observatory report, version 1. I invite you to have a look at it. And we identified also that there were 3 medium stores and 6 smaller stores. And so the flexibility that we've calculated in 0.8, now it's multiplied, each of the clusters is multiplied by 1, 3, or 6. But this is not enough, because these calculations, this multiplication is just based on a median value. And since we consider the statistical distribution and not the median value, now we have to run the Monte Carlo simulation. And so we ran this like for 10,000 times or 1,000 trials. I mean, if I remember correctly, here it is. And instead of having just one value for the mean or for the median, as you see here in the bottom figure, and they are quite apart. If I went ahead and I said that I want to choose the mean value, I would go with 81.86 kilowatt for the time between 7:15 to 7:30 in the afternoon. I could be taking some serious risk in not fulfilling. I mean, it could be 50-50. I could be right or I could be wrong. So it could be the mean value. But in fact, using this tool from Crystal Ball by Oracle, some of you may be familiar with it, I am able to mitigate this risk and say, I want to be 75% sure that I have at least an X amount of power. And it's all the green part that you see here in this plot. We are sure that at least I have 58.14 at the bottom, a kilowatt, and I'm 75% sure of it. Now, an even more positive thing is that I don't need to have the 58.14 or nothing. I still have something, even if it's not 58.14. I probably have 58 or 57.5, but it's a risk mitigation analysis that I think it's an interesting approach to consider. As the last step, what we do then, this is already from the part of the aggregator. So we take all of these 96 entries that I have throughout the day for this 12th of March, where we did this simulation. And I post this information. It's in a JSON file. I just provide these fields here as an example with this information. So the sender source, we could choose either 0, 1, or 2, which is corresponds to the aggregator. In this use case was Inesctec that was taking on this role. Then we provide, I mean, the grid node. We have the active reactive power. So of the values that we've identified, the period from, to, and so on. In the end, if we plot this 12th of March, this exercise that we did, and if we consider the median value, it would have been the orange line. And for a very, very conservative approach, I would say we took the 75th percentile. And this is what we provided as flexibility for that day. Now, as an analysis of these results, is this, and in the end, this is what we wanted to reflect on. Is this a relevant value or not? I mean, it's relatively, it has a fair store geographic density. This is why we consider this example. And we saw that it has a maximum flexibility level of around 60 kilowatt if we consider the 75th percentile. And I renew this idea that it was a very conservative approach. I mean, it's low. It's low, but we are just considering one consumer. And if this is aggregated, if we aggregate 10 or 15 more, which is not a lot, we all of a sudden we have almost 1 megawatt, which for DSOs is already relevant. Now, there to be fair, there's also some remarks to be mentioned, which are related to the assets considered. As I said, we were not considering electric vehicles in the parking lots, and they're quite relevant assets, nor other assets such as PVs, electrolyzers, or heat pumps. And these, I think this would have completely changed the analysis to the upside in terms of order of magnitude of the flexibility assessed. And I was saying if we aggregated 10 or 15 others similar to these ones, and I was not even considering big industrial consumers. So in fact, I would say that there is in fact, there could in fact be an acceptable level of flexibility for the grid in some locations. And why is this important? Regardless of the consumer classification, residential, commercial, public buildings, or industrial. If we are aware of this, or of the emerging flexibility markets, we can think ahead of time and plan ahead of time regarding infrastructure setup, the digitalization. If we have to decide on monitoring things, having remote access to it or not, we have to have this in mind. Submetering and disaggregation also for baselining and having a detailed view on our assets, the design and dimensioning of the assets themselves. And also something that consumers should be mindful is of the flexibility roadmaps released already by some DSOs, even at European level, which can identify what are the locations and the needs for the coming times. Yeah, so from our side, this was the exercise. We have a sixth moment of polls. That is related to the interest in the participation. And I would invite you to participate, I mean, regardless of your industry or your classification of as a customer, if you are a residential customer or commercial or public building or industrial. So I know that we've identified what are the resistances, what are the barriers, the concerns, but would you be willing to participate in flexibility markets?
I think we need to close the poll because
Yes.
we are a bit late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so it's clear the answer, right? So the large majority is leaning towards yes. So it's a very clear response. So thank you from my part. Madalena, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandre, and thank you all for also seeing the potential of flexibility and all these benefits. Because if you answered yes, then it means that you see the potential of all of it. I will not. So we are past 3 minutes. I just want to close down with just one slide. Really quickly, just to show you that this is indeed something that is being worked at in different perspectives, in different projects and different realities. Sorry, not this. Oh. Okay. So there was a question that was related to actual cases of flexibility markets, of flexibility provision. There are a lot of examples. You can see a lot of these examples, for example, on the European side, European projects. OneNet is one case. There are demonstrations that actually demonstrate markets. But there are also actual examples coming all over Europe. I show here two different entities or companies that actually do those markets. For example, you have nodes on the right hand side with one example of the market that they are developing in Norway. But there is also an example of that happening right now in Portugal with this project Firm E. That's being developed by Piclo and also by Redes. Which actually the first auctions happened this summer. So a lot of movement, a lot of things are happening. A lot of events are, of course, happening, addressing this topic. So it is indeed a really important topic, not only from the system operator side, but also from the customer side. this is how I wanted to wrap up this, just to show you that it is not a trend, but it's something that you will see and hear much more in these coming days. Other than that, I just want to thank you all for the participation in here, for the questions, for the unopened questions. We will address them all. Okay, still in the chat. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you for all the participants, all the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye, guys. See you
Bye.
soon.